Hello, arty peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein, and I am your host this evening. And as you can see, we have an amazing guest on the show tonight. Everybody, if you know, you know. This is Ophelia Staton. We are here for the chaos. Yes, so excited. So, Ophelia, thank you for being on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Tonight is going to be a ton of fun. It's going to be essentially, Ophelia is in school. School's in session. We are having watercolor for beginners with Ophelia so that we can kind of get back to basics, and we're going to be going through all of the very, very beginning things to know about watercolor, literally starting from scratch. Like we know nothing.
We know nothing.
She knows some things.
Ophelia's in school.
Yes. So if you guys are interested in anything we are showing on today's show, make sure to go to the website JerrysArtarama.com and type in today's class code, which is JL343. And if you type that in the search bar, the teacher's cart should come up, and that would show you everything that we're going to be using tonight. So
it's great.
We have a lot of things to go over. So basics of watercolors. Watercolor, just to begin with, is a paint that is activated by water.
Basic enough.
You mix water into it and you get some color and you can smear it around. It's very, very straightforward. So essentially, when it comes to a watercolor paint, you are now having to control water. That is, it's one of those things where it seems like this is the most kind of easy media.
It was basic for a minute until you said control water.
Exactly. So it's a very easy introductory paint to get into because you don't have to worry about solvents.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about any kind of mediums. All you literally need is water, paper, and your paint, and some brushes. That's really all you need to get started. Okay. Now, when it comes to watercolors, I wanted to go over kind of how they can come. Okay. So I have a couple of different sets here, and we're going to be working with Marie's today. Okay. So I have a set of watercolors that is a set of 12, and there are 12 tubes within the set. Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this is less than $10 for the whole set at this moment in time, in case you're watching in the future and that prices change. But I think it's like $7, $8. Okay. For the whole set.
That's a great beginner.
It's very great for budget friendly, somebody who's just tiptoeing into kind of this realm. Okay. Now, this is one way that watercolor comes, and just like you would with any other paint, you can squeeze it straight out onto your palette. Okay. So you're going to need something to put it out on. And that's why I have a couple different palette options here. This is, sorry. No. This is, you can go ahead and open it. There's nothing in there. But these are two very different types of palettes. Okay. So I brought the flower palette on so you can just see an option for, like, if you're in studio and you're not traveling around with this, this is great because you can absolutely close it up, push it off to the side. You're not going to get it on anything, right? Gotcha. This palette is actually really fun. This is actually one of Amanda's favorites. This hinges and squeeze your paints out. Okay. And of course, the set of 12, very lovely. I see. Lines up at the end. But you do have a couple of extra wells. Okay. And then plenty of space for mixing. Okay. But the fact that it closes up, you can now put that in your bag.
I gotcha.
Yes. Which is very fun.
Okay.
Excuse me. Butterfingers.
That was good. Okay.
You're not the only one who's a little bit chaotic. This also has a thumb hole. So if you want to paint plein air outside, you can have your paper set up, and then you can paint, and then have it over here, and then that way you can have that ready. Okay. And you can, that's a thumb hole, so it's good for left or right. Okay. And it's very easy to hold, so you can check it out. Right? Yeah.
I've never noticed that that's what that was for.
It's a grippy. It's for your thumb to hold on to. Yeah.
Okay.
But you don't have to hold on to it. You could very easily set it down on something. Now, remember, we are controlling water. Okay. So, typically speaking, when it comes to watercolors, you want to work flat. Okay. Because water is going to be affected by gravity, and it will take the path of least resistance, and it will drip wherever gravity will take it. So, that's one thing. While your tubed watercolors are wet in here, because you can let them dry out, not a problem. Okay. And then you can reactivate them with water. Okay. Totally fine. Which brings me to this palette. which is a little bit fancier.
That's pretty.
Our New York Central palette. This is essentially the exact same thing as this travel palette, but I've already squeezed out all of the paint.
Okay.
And it has already dried. So like I can touch it, nothing's coming off on my hand. So it is literally the exact same paint from here to here.
Okay.
This I just want to be careful with because that paint is wet and it will want to like kind of flow a little bit.
I gotcha.
So until it dries, just let it be kind of flat. But once it dries, you can
put it in your bag, whatever.
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not going to get anywhere. But they're both reactivating just easy peasy, not a problem.
Okay.
So before we jump to this set, I'm gonna scoosh it off to the side.
All right.
And I'm gonna put this over here. I wanted to very quickly show you. I have our Painter's Color Diary as well, which is great for
swatching.
Swatching. Yes.
My favorite thing.
Yes, and it has all these little beautiful squares for you to swatch on. And if you actually go to that overhead camera, I can show you guys a little bit more in depth here. All right, so there's all these different squares where you can see I've had each color in its own little designated square.
Okay.
So I have on one side a nice and thick layer of paint where it came straight out of the tube. And then I started adding water and let it kind of flow off and get lighter. That way I know exactly what my colors are gonna do, and that line right in the middle is gonna show you how transparent it is. Because a lot of watercolors are gonna have transparency. So that's something that you're just gonna have to know. There are, most of them, I'm gonna say that because there's like the chromium oxide green is gonna be a pretty opaque color just in general, but most of the other colors are gonna be very transparent.
In this set?
Yes. Well, in this set, all of them are transparent.
Okay. Okay.
But
I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
Just in general. Because it can vary from from brand to brand.
Gotcha.
Kind of
I see what you mean. Okay. So then you just need to learn your colors in your. Gotcha. Okay.
This is a great way to figure out what your colors are going to do, right?
Alrighty.
And then you can always keep this and have this off to the side to kind of reference back to it. And what I do love about this is that you can also have all these extra squares down here at the bottom for mixes. So if you want to mix that green with this yellow, or you know, that blue with this red, you can kind of see what they do.
Okay.
You can also make notations, things like that, right?
I gotcha. Okay.
So it's your diary of color.
Diary of color.
It's beautiful.
Alrighty.
So let's grab some brushes here real quick. It doesn't matter which one you grab. I'm just going to grab a Bestie Super Shader, a size 8, just because I like that square shape. We have a couple different types of brushes here, just so you can also be aware. The only brush I will ever tell you not to use is that one that comes in that really cheap set of watercolors that is like plastic bristles that look like it's literally meant for kids. It is the most frustrating brush you have ever had in your life. So that's the only one I will ever tell you just straight in the garbage.
Okay.
I'm okay.
I've seen those now. I remember. Okay. Okay.
Usually with very round shape, and then the bristles just go every which way, and it's
now I remember.
awful.
Yep.
So we have a couple different really affordable options here. I have the Mimic Squirrel and the Bestie Super Shader. Now the Bestie is a golden Taklon. This can be used for acrylic.
Okay.
It can also be used for watercolor. It's a synthetic bristle, so it's one of those ones that the water will absolutely slide off of this pretty quickly and easily. But if you take this, and here I'm going to actually grab our paper, which I'll go over paper in a second.
I'm going to move this, Hannah.
Absolutely. And I'm going to have you just start to play and tell me how it feels from one brush to the other. Just kind of... moving,
with just water.
Yes, moving the water around. So, from one brush to the other, this holds more water, this Mimic Super Squirrel. Or Mimic Super Squirrel. Wow. Mimic Squirrel.
You can't have a super squirrel.
It's super. I'm sorry, I was trying to say Super Shader and Squirrel at the same time.
Oh, this one does. This one runs out quickly because it starts making noise.
So this one is going to run out of water faster.
Okay.
But it has that, like, that snap to it.
That's what I was going to ask you, which you tell me when it's appropriate to bust in with questions, because what am I looking for with a snappiness or not a snappiness?
Here's the thing, that is entirely personal preference. So that's why I have 2 different sets on for the show.
Okay.
They're both the Try Me sets. They have a variety of brushes that come with them. Like,
okay.
This is one set of the squirrel, and then this is the set for the super shader. So you can get a couple varieties of shapes and sizes in both, and they're both, I think, like $9.99 today.
Okay.
So it's very affordable, but they're not like awful brushes that you're going to be fighting against. That's really my biggest thing.
Okay.
Is that they're not the most expensive brush. They're also not that plastic problem.
Right. But if as I'm learning, either one of these would be great to start with, right?
And to know which one is best for you, you have to just use them.
Gotcha.
And that's
That
one of
makes
those things where you're going to see whether or not you like a soft brush or you'd like a stiff brush where you can kind of get that control.
Okay.
They do just different things. There's no wrong answer as far as those brushes and what you're looking for. But that one's going to be a lot softer, and the water is going to be retained for a lot longer just because it's meant to hold onto water. So when it comes to that, though, I'm going to use the Bestie. You can use whichever one feels right to you. And I always have paper towel next to me.
Okay.
Because we're controlling water. Again, I'm going to keep going back to we are controlling water.
Okay.
Controlling how much water and where that water is going. So if I just merely want to put paint down, I'm just going to choose a color. This is the dry version, so I have to kind of work my brush into that.
Okay.
Whereas you have the wet version.
And that means I have to, I always feel with this, I'm going to waste paint. So I always pour it, sit it and let it dry, and then come back. But I don't know if that makes sense.
Dip just a little bit in.
Okay.
Where you get that paint.
Okay.
And you can brush that on. And you can always add in a little bit more water.
Oops. Okay. So see, I feel like I didn't do anything.
That's okay. This is just part of getting used to your watercolors, knowing the difference between a already dried pan versus a wet tubed paint.
I gotcha.
There is just going to be that difference where you're going to pick up a lot more color with the
yep.
wet paint, whereas the dry one, you can have a little bit more time to figure out exactly how much pigment you're going to pick up. But that's because it's dry and you have to kind of scrub in. Sometimes you have to scrub into it a little bit longer than others.
I gotcha.
That can vary from brand to brand on how long it takes to activate it.
To reactivate,
And that's why I also have
Yep.
an Aqua Mist bottle, which you can. I'm going to actually just pop this up here for just a second.
Okay. Oh, yep. Okay.
If I squirt
I've done that.
the Aqua Mist on top of here, I now have water over all of my pans, and they're all going to start activating.
Gotcha.
All of them. So
Yep.
if I'm ready to paint and I know I'm going to paint, I can just mist the whole thing and it's ready to go.
Okay.
Do we have a question?
Yes. In regards to tubes, if your paint dries in the tube, can you still reclaim it?
Technically, yes, because it will always be reactivated with water. The only problem is that if your watercolor has dried in the tube, you now have to get that out of the tube. So you'd have to cut your tube open. So, but you can technically still use it,
right.
you know? It's still going to reactivate with water, just like this did. Now, I will say this set right here, the New York Central tin, this is the one with 12. They come in larger sizes as well. This comes with 12 empty half pans. They look like, I am Butterfingers
See,
today.
okay, I think it's me.
I think it's the problem is that I drank all my coffee before we started this. I'm sorry.
That's usually my job. Okay.
It's me. I'm bringing the chaos. It looks like this. This is, let me hold this up here for everyone to see. This is an empty half pan. We also do sell them individually. We also have whole pans, which I wanted to show you guys. This is the one that happened to be full. The size difference. It's literally just like 2 of these is a whole pan.
Yep.
Now what's cool about this is that if you start with a set of 12 and you've been using it and then you go buy a separate tube of color that's like maybe a different purple or green and you go, I really love that way better than what's already in my set, you can swap these out.
I see.
That's
there.
You can dig it out and clean it out, but that would be the only option.
I gotcha.
Or you could use one of the other pans. Same thing with the flower palette is that you'd have to just squirt it into a different area, like.
I see what you mean. Yep.
And then you would have to either wash this out or kind of go from there. So that's one of those things that everything has a different kind of option, and what works for you is going to be personal. So like, there's no wrong answer.
Okay.
But this is probably the most versatile because you can swap them in and out. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm still with you.
Okay. So then we also do have pans that come individually. And this is actually the same exact color. This is that cobalt turquoise. I just didn't unwrap this one because a lot of watercolor pans come wrapped in like foil.
Yep.
Yes, they're like little presents. It's always like little presents until you have a set of 48.
And
then you have to unwrap 48
a lot of
them.
presents. I think that's
It's
fine.
fun for the first 5. And then
Valid.
All right.
Yeah, you're like, okay. The whole pan's like this because it's already panned as well. This comes in a set, but this one also came wrapped, so it had already been unwrapped, so I wanted to show you the color. Usually that label there will match.
Okay.
And then if you unwrap it, it looks like just like a normal pan, but they're already panned, and it's already dry, so it's ready to go. But I wanted to show you
Label
that.
the bottom.
Huh?
Hot tip, label the bottom.
Yes, or
Oh.
rip off the part with the name, because this is just a little label, and then you put that underneath it in the set. Or
I've
you can
never
actually
done
just use one of the really fine tip Sharpies to write down like
That's
the
what
name.
I've done before.
Yeah.
But I like
I've also
the
seen
paper.
people tape them to the bottom too, so
Yes.
that you don't just have to rely on them
Yeah.
hopefully staying up. But
That is the one thing, it can shift around a little bit, but yeah, you could very easily just glue that to the bottom.
Because you think you're going to remember.
Never.
You think you are, and then you're like, I love this color, but what is this color?
Yeah.
What is this brand? What is the, I
Okay.
don't know. Yeah, that
Okay.
helps to have the information. So that's one of those things where
Oh my gosh, my head's gonna explode, and we're 3 minutes into it. My head's gonna explode. Okay, okay.
you can always rewatch this, always gather this information some more. So
We're gonna rewatch.
You don't have to retain this all. But I'm just going over material options though. So I'm about to blow your mind some more. We're done with the half pans. Now I wanted to show you our other set that we're going to be using today.
Okay.
This is also Marie's, but this is a set of 18. It's called the Sketch and Go. So these are already panned, not tubed.
Okay.
So they are already ready to go. And what's cool about this is that, let me move this out of the way real quick so we can kind of have it here. This actually comes with a cute little water brush. We are not actually going to be using this today.
Bummer.
But you can, because it's a great little
It's adorable.
travel palette, you know. It does come with a little sea sponge that gets quite squishy when it's wet. And that is really great for cleaning off your brushes.
I thought you were gonna say texture, but never mind.
You can actually, but like if you are painting with a color, right? And then you want to actually, especially with a water brush pen, if you squeeze it with get some more water in there,
And
then you
clean
can
it
kind
off.
of, it'll,
I see.
yeah. I usually put it in the little like porcelain palette. So it'll pull that pigment off your brush, kind of a thing. Again, I also always keep paper towels next to me because that really helps me control the amount of water on my brush as well.
Okay.
So
But
that's
you're gonna
really
talk
good.
to me about that one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Okay, so with this set, you get more colors. There are 18 of them. And it does come with a cute little swatch travel sheet as well. You get the little porcelain palette that you can load up with water. You get your little brush cleaner. And I use those mainly for travel, so we're not actually going to be using the palette, the little porcelain dish, which is super cute. It's so adorable. You can also, if you ever wanted like mediums, that would be a great thing to do, but we're not going over mediums this time.
Okay, all right.
That will be in the future show. That's a more advanced thing. I don't need your head to explode on
Okay,
show.
I was about to say, I don't think, we're done.
But what I did is I swatched them in the painter's color diary as well.
Okay.
And so you have all the 18 colors here swatched out. Now, I'm gonna pop this out real quick. The biggest thing to note when it comes from panned watercolor versus wet watercolor. This is immediate use. The wet watercolor that's in a tube is immediate use. You can immediately grab a ton of paint.
I gotcha.
And you can go as dark as you want to and as pigmented as you want to. You can just punchy colors immediately. This you have to build up. Because with watercolors, you work from light to dark. Because the lights are created by the white of your paper.
Okay.
It's really hard to go backwards once you've laid down color.
Okay.
And we'll go over how to try and do a couple things with that. But that's one thing, is that you typically want to actually start with lighter layers and layer it on top of each other to get to these darks. But depending on how you work and as an artist, that might not be for you. You know, you might want something a little bit faster. So that might be the tubed colors.
Okay.
So it's just one of those things to just be aware of. Like here, you see that Prussian blue? This is the same color.
I see it.
You can see the tubed watercolor. I have such a really dark, intense blue here.
Yep.
And this is still dark and intense, but it is not as dark as the tubed.
And is that why some people prefer only to work straight out of the tube?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because that color can be super intense immediately. You don't have to scrub at the palette. You don't have to spray it beforehand. You can just immediately start going.
Okay.
Yeah. So it might be one of those things where panning your watercolors doesn't work for you because you want that intensity.
Gotcha. Okay. Then, okay.
So, and that's just to be aware.
And I can't get
Just the
there
difference.
by just misting this. Does that make sense at all, or no?
You can. It's just you're gonna have to mist this and then take your brush and like work at it.
Still go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's still possible. You're just gonna have to really
Okay.
get in there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's definitely a possibility. And even if you do that layer, let it dry, and then you can go back on
over
top
it.
of it.
Okay. Is that
You
the
can always
standard
layer.
practice? You go in light and then go back over it?
Yes.
Okay,
Typically, you start with your lighter washes, and then you layer on top of it to get darker and darker and darker and darker.
And you're going to show me how to do that?
Yes.
Okay, because I just literally go in.
That's okay.
That's all
'cause
I've ever done.
That you're chaos.
That's all I've ever done.
We're allowed.
Go
We have
right
so
in.
many comments about your aprons and how much people love them.
Aren't they so much fun?
I bring it.
It's perfect.
It's-
It's perfect for the class anyway.
We are in class.
Okay, so now we want to jump over to the fact that we have two different types of paper here.
Okay.
Because just again for basics and beginners, I'm not going to go into anything crazy on like what's the best, most amazing, perfect paper for you to use. I'm specifically talking about for beginners.
Okay.
These are essentially the exact same paper in spiral form, in like a pad,
Okay.
where I can actually flip through, just like you would a sketchbook.
Okay.
This is a block. I can't flip through it on any side. All four sides are glued except for this tiny little section right here
Okay.
that is not glued. I don't know if that's actually going to go, I doubt that's going to go in focus. The reason why we have two options here is because this one that's spiral bound is really great for practicing and for watercolors that are not using a massive quantity of water. So if you're using light, like you can use watercolor on it, but don't soak it to where it's essentially dripping wet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason why is because this will start to buckle, and that means that your paper is going to start waving and start moving on you, just because that's what paper does. This one, if you're going to load up your paper with a lot of water, use a block.
Can I ask
it
a
stays
question?
flat.
I just feel like I'm going to interrupt you every 13 seconds
Totally
with a
fine.
question. Why does it bother me that my paper buckles?
Because you're controlling water,
Uh-huh.
and every time you have a
It's going to go in the
part
divot.
of the, yes,
Okay.
your water will go down into those little like valleys, and then when you have the paper that raises up, you will have the hardest time controlling your water when your paper is not flat, because you need to work flat.
I gotcha.
That's what I'm saying. This is great for practice.
Okay.
And when you're not using a massive quantity of water, if you're doing light washes, like thinner washes.
Okay.
And then letting it dry. And then you can go back and do thinner washes.
Okay.
And let that dry. Now, if you're just loading the paper with a ton of water, that's why the block is great, because the glue will hold it down and keep it flat.
Because I'm in school and I'm learning how to properly use this, I am going to use this guy to practice,
Yes, we're going to be using this one today.
because then when would I be using massive amounts of water?
If you're trying to do gradations,
Oh, that's
we'll
a
get
word.
into that later.
Wow.
Or if you're trying to do a final, like, full watercolor piece, I would suggest
We're not
the
there
block.
yet.
No.
That's okay. See,
That's why
we're
we're
here.
going to stick
Okay.
with this. Right now we're practicing.
That's me.
This is not, none of these are precious. This is just fun paper, but they're the same. But this is what I would say for you specifically, while you're practicing, use this. When you try to actually do like a actual like watercolor image, instead of just practicing techniques, use this.
Okay.
Now, if you're struggling on here and it's buckling, switch over.
Switch over.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
why fight your materials when
That's
you
right.
have a better option?
I gotcha. Okay.
You have a question?
Yes. If you're working with watercolor in layers that reactivates,
Yes.
would you be able to use fixative to set each layer?
To an extent, because that fixative is going to start sealing your paper. And that might be a problem.
So
Now
that would-
that,
would-
though, is more advanced. And that I feel like we would absolutely cover more in our next class. But the more fixative you add onto
I'm
the
not there
paper, the more you're sealing your paper. And the less that water is going to go into your
Oh my
paper.
gosh, I got so much to learn.
I know. I know, there's a lot.
Fixative.
You have a question?
Yeah, Elizabeth is wondering if taping down your paper works as well as using a block.
It does. Absolutely, you can tape this paper down. What's really cool is that it has a
Look at me.
perforation.
Okay.
Words. It has a perforation at the top. You can also cut it easily.
Okay.
Not a big deal. And then yeah, just tape down all of the edges to either a like a gator board, which is a waterproof board. It's like foam board, so it's really, really light, but it doesn't absorb water.
Okay.
They have that on the website. You can
Gator
probably pop
board.
that into the teacher's cart later on. Or you can tape it to any non-absorbent surface. So like if you tape it to wood, your wood might start warping because you're adding water to it. So tape it to something that's not absorbent.
Non-absorbent.
Yes. Question?
Follow up.
Yes.
What's the best tape to use?
I actually use our Artist Pro tape that's white. I usually always have a roll of it under here somewhere. Ha.
Of course you did. Oh.
It is, Pro Artist Tape. This is a pH neutral tape. I love this, and it's one of those ones that when you peel it up off your paper, go slow,
Go slow.
pull away from your paper,
From your paper.
otherwise you're going to tear your paper.
Is there a time limit?
No,
Okay.
not at all. We have another question?
Yes. On that same note, would you recommend taping while the paper is wet or
Never.
dry?
Never tape when it's wet because your tape will not stick to your paper.
Also, not remove while it's wet.
Oh, yeah, don't remove it while it's wet
this
either
is
because
good.
it will tear your paper.
Okay, so paper's dry.
Tape when it's dry, pull up the tape when it's dry.
Okay.
Do all the things when it's dry.
When it's dry.
Yes. Same thing with the block, remove it when it's dry. You want to let it dry in that block because while it dries, it will also still stay nice and
it
flat. You pull that off of the block before it's wet, before it's dry, that water is going to start buckling and then you're going to have a hard time controlling it. So we are going to jump into some techniques.
Gosh. Okay.
I'm adding those two items that we just talked about to the cart.
Perfect. Amanda is amazing and adding those to the
Thank
cart
you.
for you guys to check out. Okay, so again, this is your practice here. I'm going to have you label these things so that you can give it a whirl and you can
I get to
remember
touch
this
it.
later on.
Okay,
Yes.
that's okay. I'm taking notes.
I'm going to actually use a round
Okay.
10 round because I want to have this large enough to be visible. So,
Okay.
do you want to use the panned watercolors or the
Do you know what? Can I give this to you?
Sure.
And is there a, for instance, a proper setup? Like I'm right-handed. Is there a way? Or,
The only thing I would ever suggest is that you don't have your water and your paint on opposite sides of your paper, because you're going to go from here
Okay.
over your paper to in here, and then there will be drips somewhere along the way.
Okay. So we want no drips.
So keep it on the same side. Now I'm working on this side, so I'm going to keep this over here.
Okay.
If you're right-handed, just keep it to the right of your paper.
Okay.
Because then you can do all the things that you need to do and then work over into your paper. If you find that your arm is getting into your paints or something, move it to the left.
other
It's
side.
okay. Whatever works.
How do I not properly care for this, but what do I need to do to make sure I don't like destroy it? Obviously not leave it in my,
Never leave this in your water.
Okay.
Because if you leave this sitting in your water, it's like, say, this is the top and this is the water bucket. It will start to bend like that, just
Okay.
from gravity alone. And then your bristles will eventually form like that.
Okay.
And we've all had a brush like that, and it makes us very sad because it's very hard to control.
okay,
And so it's just one of those things where just don't leave it in the water.
okay,
Scrub it off in the water, tap off the excess water, or use your paper towel. I like to, when it's around, I like to twirl it while I'm pulling it.
Okay.
Because that will also keep my bristles nice and pointy. If you ever have an issue where you're just cannot get that point back, you can also tap it on your finger like this. And while that will fling some water, I hope I did not get that on the camera, it will actually flick your bristles right back into shape.
Back into shape.
Yeah. As long as they have not been left in water and
Okay.
bent.
Okay.
You have a question?
When you are handling your brush, when you're using your fingers, for instance, to like reshape it, would that transfer enough oil to the brush that would affect the absorbency?
Only if you have just put lotion on your hands will that be a huge issue. Didn't you put lotion on your hands?
Never.
before? Okay.
And
Is it
then
right before
also,
the
does
show?
it affect the paper if you touch the paper too much?
It can. So if you do find that you're having issues where like oils from your hand are causing your colors to kind of almost have like a resist, because oils and water, they just repel each other. If you find that being a problem, you can always take like a piece of paper and put it like up
Under your
underneath,
hand.
or even a dry paper towel under your hand while you're working like this or like this, and keep that barrier.
I see.
Or one of the painter's color diary comes with these glycine pages to keep one page protected from the other. You can also use this.
Gotcha.
Just
Okay.
make sure that you're not putting it on any part of your watercolor that's wet, because you're going to possibly have it
I gotcha.
smear and not be fun.
Okay.
Question?
Is it best to store brushes vertically or horizontally to dry?
Horizontally. You would want to keep your brush either horizontal or upside down. The reason why is because you don't want that water to go into where essentially your bristles are glued.
Okay.
Because if your water goes this way, one, it can start messing with the glue of your brush.
And
Over
your hair
time.
start. Okay. Yep.
And your hair can start, especially with the less expensive brushes, it can do that. But the other thing is that your handle of your brush is made of wood. That absorbs enough water, it's going to expand, and all of this beautiful like finish that's on the outside of your brush is going to crack.
I gotcha.
I've also had that happen.
So
We've
care
all
for
had
our
it happen.
brushes.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
again, don't leave it in the water. But that's why storing it flat like this, horizontally, is going to be the easiest, because it'll just evaporate and it won't go further in.
Okay.
But you can also store it upside down. We have a brush rack, the mezzo brush rack, where it's an upside down, and you can let them dry hanging upside down, which is actually pretty fun.
May I borrow this mister so that can I miss this before I start?
Missed it.
Misty.
All right, so techniques before we run out of time.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I've just. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do, take your pencil and write value scale up here.
Let's get some lead. Value. Thank you, because I broke it. This
We're
is
gonna
why
use
I'm not
this
allowed
one.
to touch things. This is why. Okay. These
That
are my
one's
favorite.
a bigger
Value
pencil
scale.
scale. Yes. So you can do this with every single color
Okay.
as well, because technically speaking, value is how dark something is versus how light something is. Now, your value is going to be varying from color to color in the sense of what I'm about to do.
Okay.
Because what I mean by value is really actually saturation. I should say saturation scale, but So for the first little, I'm gonna use the flower palette as like a mixing thing.
Okay.
So, because I'm using the wet straight out of the tube, right?
Uh-huh.
So, grab some paint. I don't know which one I just grabbed. I'm gonna guess it's this one. All right, so I'm gonna grab a little bit of paint. And the first thing I'm gonna do, it doesn't matter what color, I'm gonna try and get it as saturated as possible, which honestly I could just grab straight paint and go.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So there's my
As dark as it'll
most
go.
saturated dark color, right?
Okay.
Then I'm gonna start adding in some more water and see exactly what happens when I start adding in more and more water.
Okay. Oh, I didn't keep up.
Oh, you're fine.
More
Again,
water.
I'm using wet watercolors straight out of a tube, and you're using the panned.
Am I adding water to where? To this little puddle I've made?
Essentially, you want to add more and more water versus pigment. Because the more water you add, the lighter it's going to be, right?
Okay. That is, oh,
See?
Okay.
You added less of the pigment and more water, so
Okay.
therefore, it's going to just appear lighter.
oh, that's going to be some practice. Because
This is why we're here in school.
okay, this is,
So
I get to fail before you guys.
that's okay, because here's the thing: is if you decide that that is not quite light enough, you can clean your brush off completely.
Okay.
Right,
Cleaning my brush.
and then add in. I'm gonna lighten this one. You lighten that one, right? Add a little bit of water.
I just took it all out. This is great.
That's okay, because
Wait.
if I start swirling it like this, ta-da, right? And then if I decide that that's too much water, if I take my paper towel, and I always pull against the bristle like this to keep my bristles nice and in shape,
Okay.
right? It just takes some practice of always doing that. If I decide this is too much water, dry off most of the water off of my brush, and then it'll start acting like a sponge, and I can pick up some of that water.
Okay.
You can also use an absolutely dry brush too. That will absolutely work. Like, I think there's a little too much water right here
Okay.
because it looks like it's puddling. If I just take my clean dry brush and kind of pick up that extra water,
Am I
there's
trying?
less water there.
Sorry.
you're fine.
Am I trying to get this from like saturated as dark as it will go to water?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is what I mean by value scale. So this is a value scale specifically for that color.
Okay.
So we're not trying to get these are in value or a value scale of like which paint is the lighter color. Like yellow would be lighter than purple.
Right.
Not talking about that. I'm talking about like the saturation of a single color
I
and
gotcha.
trying to be able to control that and
Okay.
understanding how much water you have to add versus
Okay.
how much pigment you need to add to get to that color that you're looking for.
I've got a feeling this is going to be my homework because
is part
I've
of your
made
homework,
the
yes.
same color 15 times.
That's okay. Because that's the thing. Dip your brush in water. Don't dip it in there. And then,
Of course it worked now.
because you keep adding more pigment to the same brush. And it's just one of those things where this is going to be practice. You have to get that feel down. And the only way you're really going to be able to get that control is by doing it.
So we don't just splash color around.
We can. That'll come later. But this is, again, we are trying
all
to
I know.
control water. We are going to, the biggest issue
Control
that
water.
you're going to have
Sorry.
is you need to continue to look back on, do I have too much water or too little water?
Will you show me what's too much water?
Hold on, let me get a color here. We'll do blue.
And let's see if I can
Now,
do
here's
too
the
much
thing.
water.
If that's what I'm going for, that's also totally fine. Because if I'm looking for,
Yep.
all right.
I've got a puddle. That's too much?
Yes. Now here's the thing. I'm going to say this is too much water because, and if we go to that side camera here, I can definitely show you guys on the camera too. Okay, here. That is a big puddle of water.
Okay.
On this paper, that's what I mean by you don't want to use this paper for this. This would be fine on the block because that's going to start bending my paper.
Okay.
That is a puddle of water, essentially. Now, it's going to be really hard for me to control anything that goes on in here. So if I'm looking to get one smooth gradient of color, where it's like essentially called a flat wash, where it's all the same color within this puddle, that is fine, but you're going to have a long time to wait before all of this dries.
Okay.
If you use more pigment and less water, then you're going to have the same result with less wait time, essentially. But if I take that, this is what I'm talking about, when I take my my brush and remove the water
Okay.
with my paper towel.
You're very dependent on that paper towel.
I am very dependent because, again, I'm controlling water. So I have to control how much water is on my brush so that I can control that paper.
Now we're controlling things.
It's a very controlled thing.
This is gonna. Oh my gosh. Okay, so it's practice.
Yes.
That's.
Now,
I'm
here
gonna
comes
ruin
the
it.
fun
I'm gonna
stuff.
ruin it. Okay.
What I just did was a big wash of blue. Actually, let me grab this back. Here.
Okay.
Right?
Big wash.
I'm just gonna, not a ton of water, not like a puddle like I had before, but I'm gonna get it saturated, right? That's wet.
Okay.
Right?
I see. There's like a glistening, or what do you call it? Shiny.
It's wet, but there's no puddles,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
And if I just make sure that I move that around, it should all be essentially the same color because that's all one big puddle of blue, right?
Okay.
Now, I'm gonna show you the wet on wet technique,
Okay.
which is gonna be probably your favorite. So
I'm gonna label that.
one.
I'm a great note taker.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I should pull out my phone and take a picture of the notes. Is that what I do? Like I'm
You're
in
gonna
class?
take this with you.
Wait a
so.
minute. Oh. Row.
Okay.
Okay.
So that is still wet. It
What
has
is
not
still-
dried.
oh, this.
This puddle is still wet, right?
Okay.
So if I take some of this purple
Yep.
that I
that's
just
what-
mixed up.
How do we know what? Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, you can actually, if you go kind of at an angle and you can see
That it's
that
shiny.
shine, like
Uh-huh.
it's wet. You know, you can see where it's wet. Now, if I take the purple that I just mixed up and I go in there, I just put a wet line of color
Mm-hmm.
on a wet saturated level, a layer of like a wash.
Uh-huh.
That is wet on wet because it's wet going into
Onto
wet.
wet. Okay.
Right? Very simple.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And-
now the thing to know with this is that you are never going to get a crisp line. You see how it's starting to feather out on the edges?
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So it just kind of blurs in there.
Mm-hmm. Now this is something that might be really fun for you because if say you, let's do
I don't
a
know
big
what-
puddle, let's do a big circle, right? And then I take some of this
Okay.
and I just put water on there, right?
I'm guessing there's a time limit.
Until that water evaporates. Because I can't go back in there and swirl that around with water,
Okay.
right? Because if I do that, then all my colors are going to mix,
Okay.
right?
Okay. I believe you, teacher.
So this would be fun for you to get like almost like a little confetti kind of look where you get all those colors kind of mixing together.
Okay.
And it's where all of those colors are going to kind of move and bleed together because the pigment is going to move around. Now, this is something to practice with on having it really wet where you have like a big puddle.
Okay.
And then you drop it in, or you can have it a little bit drier and then drop it in and see the difference on how your pigments are moving.
Because mine is not doing
Exactly,
what yours
because you
is.
have a little less water. And that's nothing wrong. It's not wrong that you did that. It's just knowing what your paints are going to do. Now, this right here would drive you crazy if you're trying to get a nice crisp line and you went wet on wet, right?
So how do I get a nice crisp line?
You have to go wet on dry.
Dry.
Yes. So that would be essentially, we can probably do that up here where it's dry. Maybe on one of yours. Yeah. Okay, so I'm still use that purple. Well, that's not purple. There we go. So if I have this right here, this is all nice and dry. If I take that same purple, it's not going to bleed
Move.
around, and it's going to give me that crisp edge because that is wet paint going into a dry surface.
Is this for details? And this is for background, maybe?
Absolutely, that'd be a great way to do that. But here's
I'm
the thing: is
smart.
that if you're also working on your first few layers and just
Okay.
trying to kind of block in where colors are, this is the wet on wet is really great because you can kind of sort of loosely place where things are going to be, and have less rigidity on like it's perfectly rendered. This is more abstract Ophelia.
Okay.
Here.
I was about to say everything else. You just went right over my head. Okay.
So for you,
Uh-huh.
this might be a lot more fun, but you know how you do those, if anybody's familiar with Ophelia, how you do
That
your
line in the
your
end?
line and things like that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You can still use pencils and things, but if you use a brush with paint,
With dry.
you have to wait for it to dry before you do that to get that nice crisp line.
Understood.
Right.
Okay.
So,
All
and
right.
then I'm gonna write
Wet on dry. Okay. All right. And that's still wet.
Yes.
But is there a magic to when it's dry, or you just kind of test it and figure out which one's...
typically speaking, that sheen, that like glisten,
Uh-huh.
is gonna go away.
Okay.
Now, if you're really tired of waiting, you
Okay.
can hit it with a hairdryer. It's not
Hit it.
yes, smack it with a hairdryer. No, turn the hairdryer on and point it at it.
Gotcha.
But the only thing is that if you do have a big puddle, like there's a lot more up here,
gonna push.
it will move your pigments around.
Okay.
Now the other thing is that you could very easily also start tilting this and having fun with where that paint's gonna go and have it move around just with the help of gravity.
Are some colors more movie than others?
That is going to depend on brand,
Okay.
how much pigment is in there,
Okay.
the pigment that's in there, and the color, and it can be, but it is, that's why I'm saying this is great for you to, if you have whatever set you have at home or whatever you have on hand, play with it, see what it does, because you just don't know until you start playing with it.
So regardless, I need to practice.
Yes.
And learn my materials.
Yes, because you better be practicing, because we'll be back with another episode of
So you can't tell
watercolors.
me exactly what to get or what to do. You can just tell me to use what is here.
You're going to be using
and
what
practice.
is here, but for the people watching, use whatever you can afford, essentially. If your budget is what your budget is, whatever you have available to you is the best materials.
I get it. I just
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like it's overwhelming, all of the choices, and what do you get as a beginner?
And that's why I'm using, these are all student grade paints
Mm-hmm.
that we're using, even the 18 Sketch and Go. It's not a professional line. Now, Marie's does have a professional line, which I brought a tube. It's the Marie's Masters. Where's the other tube of paint? Right here.
One is white, one is silver.
One's fancy and silver, and like this is still great paint. This right here is still great paint, but this is a student level grade paint. So this is not going to have as much pigment as this one's going to have. This is going to last you a lot longer because that pigment will go a lot further.
I see.
And you won't need as much paint here as you will for this. Now, there's nothing wrong with having the student grade paint, especially when you're practicing,
Right.
when you're trying things out. But again, if you have a set of 12 and you're limited in your colors, you could buy just a single tube of color. Like this is the purple red. I love the purple red.
And I can replace these colors
Yes.
when I
Absolutely.
go through them.
Or you can add, like if you have this little travel palette, you have extra wells here, you can always add in more.
Okay.
Or if you have, the little travel palette here, you can get the larger set and it gives you space for, I think, 12 more pans, and you
Okay.
can start adding in more. There's nothing wrong with using student grade paint at all.
Okay, well, I feel like this helps because it puts the package together for me, so I don't have to go figure out which colors I
Exactly.
need, and then I learn these colors,
Yeah.
and then add to them as
These
I need.
are, having this set of 12 or the set of 18 is great because you don't have an overwhelming sense
There,
of
yep.
choice of colors.
Okay.
Now, if you do see a color though that you're just like, I can't live without it, yeah, you can go get it. Why
Okay,
not?
okay, that makes sense.
You can buy an individual tube, go for it.
Okay.
But the one thing I will say, while I panned all of these, this purple red would pan beautifully. The only thing I did forget to mention that I would not pan is anything sparkly. This is copper. The reason why is because this has a mica in it. That's what makes it sparkle.
Okay.
Now the mica acts like a sponge. So when you pan it and go to let it dry, it sucks everything in on itself, and it essentially looks like you did not squirt the entire tube of paint in
I see.
there.
Okay.
So anything sparkly, don't try and pan it.
That's what you
unless
use
it
fresh
comes
out of the
panned.
tube.
Yes.
I gotcha. Okay.
Use it fresh out of the tube.
Okay, okay.
I almost forgot to tell you that.
And
I've done that, and it's very frustrating.
it's frustrating.
Yes.
As a beginner, you said I'm going to have homework.
Yes.
Will you tell me if I've purchased this guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do I learn my colors? I know that sounds absurd, but what types of things do I need to do? Like, do I look at pictures and practice mixing the color in the picture, or
Yes.
is that kind of how I learn
Absolutely.
it? Okay.
But again, I want you to work on these techniques before you start attempting a picture.
Okay.
Because these
Yeah, we're not doing
techniques,
pictures.
the techniques or like things that you would use, like the wet on wet or the wet on dry.
Okay.
You have to then figure out which one you're going to need in order to achieve what you want for the picture. So we definitely need to move on though, because we're going to run out of time. It's 6:20. The one thing I
gosh.
did want to show you though,
Okay.
a couple other techniques is dry brushing. So I have that purple on my brush, and it's not very wet at all.
I
You
see it.
see that texture of the paper is coming through.
Yep.
That is a dry brush. Again, it's controlling water on, you have to figure out whether or not it's too much water or too little water. Now this is too little water, but this is a great technique if you're looking for that kind of gritty kind of feel. That would be great for if you're doing dirt or concrete, or if you're doing something that has that texture to it, because you could always do a dry brush over top of something that's dry.
Okay.
And that way it's not dry brush on just pure white paper, it would be dry brush on like a color, you know?
I trust you.
Okay, then we have, I was showing you earlier the flat wash. It's essentially how we did our value scale, right? The idea for a flat wash is that you want to get a unified wash of color.
Is that like a windshield wiper motion?
Yeah, I'm just going left to right. Again, I'm using the wet tubed paint. Now you can always change the direction in which you're doing this. If you find that you're having more pigment up here and it's not coming down here,
Okay.
just change the direction.
Oh, I see
You
what
can
you
go
mean.
back and
Yep.
forth,
Okay.
up and down kind of a thing. And that will spread out your pigment. Now, again, because this is wet, this all wants to kind of move around and settle in and kind of almost self-level kind of thing, where you're not going to have any of those sharp lines. So all of those brush strokes that I just did should essentially disappear. But
I see.
this is a flat wash where essentially the whole section of your color is one single cohesive color.
Okay.
There's no variation to it,
Okay.
right? Now, what's cool with the next thing is called a gradiated wash, which is essentially how I did my swatches. Let's go with this burnt sienna, because this is a very pigmented color. Now, I'm gonna actually scooch this up. So this is a gradiated wash where I go from really saturated to less saturated. Now, you can either pick up from where you left off, or you can push it and you can pull it and you go back and forth to try and kind of move that around. But the one thing that you are now going to have to do is, do you see how there's a bit of a puddle right here?
Okay.
I'm going to take my brush and pick up just a little bit of that extra water,
Okay.
because if I don't do that, that big puddle of water will bloom out and it will mess with my gradiated wash.
Okay.
So that's one of those things where, again, we are controlling water.
I noticed you're very careful, and your brush was kind of like barely touching that paper.
Yes. And it soaked straight in. didn't
Okay.
it?
Because what can I overdo it on my paper? Like,
Over scrub.
yeah,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like over.
You can overbrush.
Wash.
You can overbrush your paper, absolutely.
Okay.
Again, this is something that you're gonna have to learn just by touch.
All right.
So when
Oh.
you figure out that like it's just like either your paint is starting to dry, like up here at the very top, it's starting to dry. I don't want to go back into that, because that means that what's wet will move differently from what's dry.
Uh-huh.
At this point, I would just leave it be.
Okay.
So that is called a push because you pushed up into your paint.
Uh-huh.
And if you were to take it back from where you were and pull it down, that's called a pull.
Oh, look at me
Both are
inventing
absolutely
things.
correct.
Probably didn't.
No, you did a great. Look at
Did
that
I?
beautiful gradation. Look at that. Everyone, a round of applause for Ophelia. Yes, golf clap, golf
Oh,
clap.
yay. Look at me getting applause. Okay. I didn't realize.
It is very difficult to do, but you did it.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you
We'll
did.
figure- okay, I
see
did.
it. I see it. I see it right there.
I did a good job.
Okay, so that's a gradiated wash. Now, you can do that with 2 different colors,
Oh.
and that's called blending.
Oh, wait a minute. All right. So we said gradiated?
G-R-A, or graded. Gradation?
Graduated.
Graduated
Wash. It graduated.
words.
Alrighty. And what was the next one? Blended.
Blending is where you essentially do the same thing.
I'm making it sideways
okay.
because I feel like if I do it this way, then I have to be
Yeah, no,
free.
no,
So
you're
I'm
perfect.
Doing, okay, so
I'm gonna have you do
blending.
the same thing. I'm gonna do mine over here. How
Okay.
about that? Again, just start it the exact same way you started the other one, right?
Okay.
Where you go. From
Does it
really
matter which color?
saturated.
Okay.
Doesn't matter which color. Really saturated to really light.
All right. Really saturated.
No, it doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to be working wet on wet. This is a wet on wet.
Okay.
And then I'm going to take this red that I have because it doesn't really matter.
I go
Right?
all the way down.
You don't have to.
okay.
Yeah. Because the idea is if I take that color
Oh.
and then start working my way into that purple,
So
I don't have
start
to.
down
I don't
here.
have to fluff it all together if I don't want to. They're both wet. They're gonna start moving to
They'll
each
fluff
other.
together.
Yeah, they're gonna start moving.
They'll fluff.
But if I want to kind of assist it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, what I can do is get a sort of clean brush and then just kind of move them together, back and forth,
Oops.
and then it'll start moving it a little bit better.
You said sort of dry brush. I'm sorry.
It doesn't have to be perfectly dry.
But is
yeah,
it clean?
Yeah, ish. It doesn't matter if the previous pigment is on there either.
Okay.
But if you, again, you just want light touches.
I was about to say, am I doing too much when I start to lift it?
Now, the reason why you're seeing that line right there and you're seeing that really happen is because the amount of water that you had on your brush versus the amount of water that's on your paint or on the paper. So if you have too much water, you're going to start pushing that pigment away.
Oh.
And that's okay. This is all in practice.
I'm kind of done with school for today. This is a lot
We're
of school.
almost done, I swear. So that right there is your blending. Now glazing, we already did. That wet on dry,
Wet on
where
dry.
you put one layer,
It's also glazing.
one layer down,
Uh-huh.
let it dry,
Okay.
put another layer on top, let it dry. That is a glaze. That is a purple glaze on top of the teal glaze.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm.
So that's essentially something you can do for, say, if you're trying to do a leaf, right? And you want to get a shadow, you can very easily put that little like center line and have the shadow kind of, yeah, just like that.
Do you have to see? I'm
perfect.
nervous. I wasn't.
Yeah, but like you can still see that edge of where that teal was,
I see
right?
it, yep.
Exactly. Because watercolor is transparent, when you put something on top of the other, you're going to see them both together. And they're what's called optically mixing, and they're creating a whole new color where they intersect, which is fun.
Okay.
Yes, we have a color or a
Color.
A question.
See, I'm. This is hard.
It is hard.
I just want to let you know that you were getting a lot of love in the chat, Ophelia.
Nuh-uh. Thank you very.
She's
I
doing
appreciate
such
you.
a great job. This is it. We are trying to control water. I know it seems like this is so
I
easy.
splash
Just
watercolor
Just
around.
splash it.
That's
Yeah.
all I do.
Which it can be super fun. You can do that. But if you're really trying to achieve any kind of like rendering or anything that's not specifically abstract and kind of just splashing color around, you need to control water, and it's not easy. It is surprisingly not easy. But
Technical.
okay, last couple things.
Okay, listening.
Feathering out.
Whoa, that
is
just
where-
went big. Feathering out.
Feathering out is where you take a clean but wet brush. It doesn't have to be sopping wet, but
Okay.
you do want to take a wet brush. You can do this to a dry layer or a wet layer.
Okay.
Wet layer, you have to be a little bit more careful because you want to make sure that you're not picking up too much. But I'm going to use it here, like I just did. That's a little too much water. See how it's kind of puddling?
I do.
I want to make sure that my brush is wet but not sopping wet. Now, I'm going to start activating that edge and feather it out. Well, I just dry brushed, but here's the thing. I can take this and then pick it back up while it's still wet. And that is now feathered out. Now, here's the thing. Some of your paints, depending on what brand you use and depending on your paper and things like that,
Will stain.
it will stain. I have an edge here that's still there that I'm not going to be able to really get rid of.
And that's learning my paint.
Yes, and so if you're trying to get a really soft edge and you know your paper or your paint is going to do that, do it while it's wet. So that you can get that like just a soft gradation. Like again, with that leaf, if you lay down that line, but you want it soft on one side because it's a shadow, you can just then quickly clean off your brush and then just hit that side of it to where it just softens that edge. Right?
Sure.
But if you do it dry, there's a risk you do run where it's going to have
So there's
that
a
hard
time
edge.
limit.
Right
I gotcha.
there.
I see it.
Right
Yep.
there. So,
Okay.
the last thing should be pretty fun.
Wait, we were having fun. Wait,
Yes.
what? Wait, what?
You're killing me.
Oh
All
my
right,
god.
so the last
this
thing is fun, and you can do it with as much water or as little as water as you want. You can do it with all kinds of brushes.
Okay.
Hopefully I don't get you. I'm sorry if I
Let's do it. Okay, what are we doing?
Splatter!
Splat. Okay, so
So what I like to do is I like to take,
same brush.
it doesn't matter what brush really. You could also use,
I use watercolor to like color my grocery list. That's about as technical as I get.
and you're going to be practicing though. But you could take a fan brush.
Oh,
and
fan.
you could take a fan brush, or you could take a flat brush. I like actually using the Bestie for this because they have that snap, right?
Okay.
So if you take your fan brush
Oh, fan brushing. But you didn't. Oh lord.
and you get a little bit of that blue on there, or whatever color, and then you just flick it against your finger. Yes, I'm getting it on my finger.
I see the
paints
difference.
need to be non-toxic for you to do this technique. If it is something that you're just not sure, you don't want to get it on your hand, because I get that. What I do like to do is take whatever brush. You can also use a flat brush or.
But I see the difference in your splatters.
Yes. This is going to be a lot finer.
Yep.
Because it is a smaller brush and it was less loaded. Now, when I use my round brush and I just tap it against my finger, you're going to have a heck of a hard time controlling that, but it is so much fun.
Oops, I think, okay.
Yeah, no, it's make a mess. You're
Don't
fine.
let Katie see that we got paint everywhere.
Oh, it's watercolor. It'll come off with water.
Sorry, Katie.
It's fine. It's okay.
Oh wait, I can clean it with
Cleans
water.
with water.
I got
Ta-da!
it now. I got it. Okay.
Now
Splatters. When would I use splatters?
Texture, background is really fun. If you're trying to get like texture on maybe like a frog or something, I don't know. They have a lot of like little textures and things like that. If you're doing something that's maybe ethereal and you have a lot of texture
School
in
is
your
hard.
work. But like if you try this on like an Ophelia painting, that would be really fun, just to add a little bit of visual excitement and texture. And what's great is that once this dries, you could absolutely glaze on top of it. You will, there's a possibility though, is that if you don't let this fully dry, they can smear and start really
I see
picking
what you
up.
mean.
But it's one of those things where you could glaze on top of that. Again, when you're glazing on top of another color, you want to do as few strokes as possible. Like with that right there, that was one single stroke.
Okay.
And that's because when you start really scrubbing in, you're going to start activating those underlying layers.
And lift it.
Yes. So this is going to take a little bit more planning.
Who's in class with me? Who's in class with me?
Show her some love.
And what do I need? What's my homework?
Okay. So your homework is to practice these techniques.
Oh, practice all of them.
All of them. And then I want you to use them in one piece of art.
Wait, what?
One piece of art. I'm not saying it has to be representational. I'm not saying it has to be any specific thing. It doesn't have to be like leaves or a frog.
I just checked
or
out.
anything. Yeah, no, it could be abstract.
Ophelia to the office to check out.
It could be an
Ophelia
app-
to the office to check out.
Don't you worry. I'm gonna get her to do it because we're gonna have an intermediate class.
Oh, we're having another class.
So in our next installment of Ophelia Goes to School, essentially, we're going to be going over intermediate watercolors. So we're going to continue where we left off here, and we're going to go into more techniques.
Oh,
But this, I want you to practice well.
Okay.
We have this break.
I
think
will
it's gonna be
practice.
about a month.
That's
give or take.
fair.
And so practice these techniques. Do your best, and if you're having a hard time, you can always ask me questions. And if you guys are out there are having a hard time with these techniques, you can always leave a comment. You can always write something or post pictures in our Jerry's Life Facebook group. And in the
Please.
Facebook group, it's not just me that is available for advice. It's all the people that are already in there. There's like 7,000 people. Artists of all levels.
kind.
So there's professionals, there's people who are hobbyists, there's all types. And you have to be kind in that group.
We're beginner. I'm a beginner at this.
But
Okay, we're kind.
They're all very supportive.
Okay.
So if you are having issues with trying to control your watercolors, reach out. We are always happy to help.
I'm gonna put. Okay, all right. I'm in school.
Yes. So
Somebody is out
practice
there
your
with me.
techniques and one piece of art
Okay.
that we will show on the next show.
Oh,
Not the next show after this specifically. The
When I
next show
come back.
that you come back.
school's
be in
back
about a
in
month.
session. Back in a month.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Again, you can always rewatch this. I know that was a lot of
nervous.
information.
Yeah. First day of
But you
school.
got this.
Oh, good. I packed my lunch. Now I can go have lunch. Thanks.
She's a
Literally. Okay. This was a lot. This was
I
a
know.
lot.
This was a lot of basics and a lot of information coming at you. So take your time to practice and figure out what works best for you. Because one technique might be great for you as an artist and it might not be great. The other one might be really frustrating and,
Okay.
you know, it just might not work for you. That's okay.
All right.
You have to figure out what works for you.
So I'm gonna figure out my brushes and figure out my techniques. And I'm okay. All right. We'll figure it out. I'm figuring out a lot of things. Thank you guys for
I
having
think
me.
Ophelia's panicked. Just
Did you notice that? It's like we are now. When you said finished piece, I'm like, yeah, we're done.
I didn't say that you have to be like in love with it. I just want something that's like you did a piece of art.
All right.
But knowing her, it's going to be amazing. So, everyone give Ophelia a round of applause.
Thank you guys for being in school with me.
Hit that thumbs up button because she did great. I know I just hit you with a lot of information
did.
and you're about to do a lot of work at home.
There's beginners out there that are right here with me.
Yes. And we appreciate you guys for watching. Now, of course, next week, though, make sure you guys join me because we're going to have another guest on. We're going to have Jeff Olson back in the studio.
Jeff.
And we're going to be going over Pantone markers and inks.
Ooh, that's a good
Because that's a brand new product that just hit the market, and I'm very excited. It's going to be so much fun. But I hope you guys are going to join me then, and it's going to be a blast with markers. So, yeah. We will see you guys next time. Are you ready?
You go first because I'm not
No,
ready. I'm a student. You're the coordinator
fine.
of the chaos.
No. We're gonna make this happen. Okay, you ready?
Oh wait, are we
Chicken dance.
chicken?
Bye, guys.
Bye bye.